This is Jessica Kirkland, and I'm here with Patricia Tuohy at the Oak Hill Library in Austin, Texas, and she has agreed to be interviewed. This interview is part of the Capturing Our Stories oral history program of retiring librarians. It is one of Lorraine Roy's American Library Association presidential initiatives. This recording will be the property of the ALA and may be published and used for scholarly research. Today is June 17th, 2009. Well, Pat, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. So let's get right into it. Tell us just a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your library career in brief.
In brief. Well, I am a native Texan, born in San Antonio, raised in Corpus Christi. My senior year of high school, I became a library aide after I was kicked out of the Spanish class that I was in, Spanish 4. So I have had always been a library user in Corpus Christi, grew up near the Lauritama Public Library, and it was a natural extension to actually work in a library rather than just hang out in a library. I graduated from the University of Texas in 1970, but before then I had been a huge user of the University Library, of course, the Latin American collection. And at that time it was in the main building of the university on the 3rd floor. We shared a corridor and a bathroom with the library school when it was there on the 3rd floor. And as I hung out in the hallway with Cokes, because you couldn't take those into the library, I talked with library school students and asked them, well, what's library school all about? And I can't even tell you who these people were, but they were enthusiastic about library school, and how most appealing to me is how you get to stay in libraries and hang out in libraries. And since my life was revolving around the Latin American collection, I thought, ooh-wee, that would be wonderful. I could just hang out here and get paid for it. So I investigated library school. And my last semester as an undergraduate, I took the 2 preliminary undergraduate courses. So they're part of my undergraduate degree. And then started graduate work the spring of 1971.
Awesome.
Way back in the dark ages, before there were computers. And in fact, I think the University of Texas cataloging department got its first OCLC computer in 1972.
Wow.
It was a long time ago, and I was in library school and became disenchanted with university libraries and much more interested in public libraries. So my specialty was changed, I guess, second semester to public libraries.
So what was it that led to you becoming, as you say, disenchanted with academic libraries?
Cataloging.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's be perfectly clear. It was cataloging. It was AACR 1. Wasn't even 2 back then.
Oh, wow.
And the notoriously difficult cataloging teacher at the time, who I'm not even sure who that was, but it was a prerequisite for academic libraries. And I knew I couldn't make the cut. I could barely make a B in Billy Grace Herring's beginning cataloging course. And Billy Grace Herring needs to be interviewed for this because she's a wonderful library school teacher, Dr. Herring, and you need to interview her very soon. But okay. She is a wonderful woman, guided the careers and positively influenced library school students for years and years.
That's wonderful.
And I owe her an incredible debt because I didn't earn a B in that class. But she saw in me a love of libraries, and she really gave me a B, which was exactly what you had to have. And I'm eternally grateful to her. She wouldn't remember this at all, but I, of course, do.
What was it about her that made her so wonderful and inspiring?
Well, a very genuine, caring person. I believe she was a lecturer at that time, working on a PhD in library science at the university. But she really cared about students, and as you talked to her, you revealed things to her that she saw very much the humanity in all these students that she was the advisor for. And when I told her I was looking much more interested in public libraries, she was very enthusiastic about that change, and she said, yes, you would be a great public librarian. And I think that's a good career choice for you to pursue. A wonderful advisor, a wonderful teacher, and a great library humanitarian.
I love that. So what was it about public librarianship that appealed to you and that drew you in? And aside from deciding that cataloging wasn't for you, what prompted that change?
Well, it was hanging out in the hallway and with a very charismatic, controversial teacher of public libraries named Sam Witten. Sam Witten, W-I-T-T-E-N, is a legend among the old-timers in the library school. He taught public libraries, he taught publishing, he taught library history, and he was a non-PhD. He was a practicing public librarian who'd spent many years on the reference desk and head of reference at Dallas Public. He knew public libraries, he knew reference, he knew people, he knew the organization, the rough and tumble of public libraries, which are very out front, in-your-face political. They've always been. We pretend as public librarians that we're above the fray, but we are not. We are right down there with police, fire, scraping for money. We're in the public arena. And Sam was very forthright about the need for public librarians, or all librarians really, to get involved in politics and to try to influence the political process to the favor or to the benefit of public libraries. And Sam was a great character, and his wife was a school librarian for many years at the Westlake or Eames district. But Sam was library raconteur and active in ALA, but especially TLA. He was Librarian of the Year, I think, in 1972 or something like that, one of those years. A great man, and just a great influence on what a public librarian is going to be faced with, what they need to think about, what they need to know, at least beginning their career. And he was very, very much a big influence on me.
Great.
And he had a large circle of very liberal Democrats in Austin, and that was very energizing during the old days.
That's wonderful. What are some, you mentioned that he talked about the things that you needed to know before you started being a librarian. What were some of those lessons that he taught you?
The most powerful that I can clearly remember several classes was the obligation and the sacred duty, no less sacred duty, of a public librarian to preserve and promote and guard intellectual freedom in the public library setting. Intellectual freedom is a core principle of public librarianship, and that as we as librarians have to defend it, even though we may not agree and may be scared to death about what it's going to do to our career or our job, and we could lose whatever the job was that we were in trying to defend intellectual freedom. It was a sacred duty, and founded on those core American values and principles. He really believed that, and he taught his students, or I learned, that was the most basic element of public librarianship, was preservation of intellectual freedom, and going to the mat for it. We had many lively and scary discussions in classes about it with people who were from the marketing field, who felt, give the customer what they want. If they don't want that book, take it off. That's what you do in a retail setting, right? Well, Sam was real strong about, we are not in retail. We have a public responsibility, a sacred duty to preserve intellectual freedom for our readers in our community and to defend it. And he lived through the McCarthy era. He'd gotten his library degree at UT, one of the first MLSs declared or granted way back in the 50s, or he'd been around a while, and he'd lived through those rough years of blacklists and Red Scares and terrible oppression that is certainly possible in any community in America that is absolutely sure that they have a lock on the truth, and you ought to believe it, and we shouldn't have that smut on our shelves. And he was so inspiring about that. Yeah. He was so adamant. And I adopted that as my personal philosophy, and one of the guiding principles of my career. Wow. is a strong belief in that.
What an amazing mentor to have had. And
absolutely.
To have someone that convicted about it. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of a time when, that philosophy that you adopted from him, that you've had to really stand up for that? Have
Yes.
there been some professional situations you've been in?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, in 1980, probably 87, I want to say, the city of Austin adopted an anti-apartheid ordinance that basically said, we will not do businesses that do business in South Africa. This was probably before you were born.
Okay.
And I could go back and look at what dates there were. But the key thing about that affected libraries was at that time, the publishers of Encyclopedia Britannica and the Buena Vista Film Company, which is a part of Disney, they sold directly to businesses in South Africa. In effect, they were on the blacklist. We created, by this ordinance, a blacklist of businesses that did business with South African businesses.
Okay.
So suddenly the library could not buy directly Encyclopedia Britannica from the publisher.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, think about that. We couldn't buy Buena Vista Films, and I was the coordinator of Central Texas Library System. So this had to be later than that. This had to be, not mid-80s. It had to be like 90 or 91. I'm sorry about the dates. But we had a film collection, a 16-millimeter film collection funded by the state to serve public libraries in a 30-county region. And we couldn't buy Disney films. Wow. Disney, like, the short 16-millimeter things that were The Legend of Sleepy Hollow or Winnie the Pooh, and we could not buy these from Buena Vista. Well, this is censorship, right? And as the impact of this ordinance became clear, the woman in my office, who was the film librarian, Susan Niefler, came to me and said, I know that this is out of line. But I really need to make a stand for intellectual freedom here against this type of commercial censorship. And I know you probably may not want to support me on this, but I just want you to know I have to make a stand. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. We do have to make a stand. And so with her in the leadership position, we made a case first to the city council, first to the library commission, then to the city council, that this was de facto, this was actually out and out censorship based on business practices of a company, not on the content of the material or the suitability of the material, that this was censorship. Pure and simple. The director of the Austin Public Library, David Earl Holt, allowed us to do this. And he could have at any time said, don't do this, don't do this. He wasn't going to take up the charge because it was politically impossible for the director of the library to go against the city council and the city management. This was an adopted ordinance. But he let us make our case, and we made a very strong case. We also went and we took it to the council. What we were asking for was an exemption from the ordinance so that we could buy library materials. And I do want to say that the city attorney's office, spineless city attorney, by the way, whoever the hell he was at that time, a spineless city attorney, would not take a position on our request. even though they bought the tax code that everybody buys, and it's the definitive thing, published by one of the publishers on the blacklist. And of course what we did would benefit them, because then they could buy the books they needed, law books, for their continuing practice and their internal. But they wouldn't take a position on it. Spineless attorney, whatever name he was. Anyway, so we took it before council, and we won the day. We got an exemption to allow us to buy Encyclopedia Britannica.
Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah. It was, for us, a situation we never thought of. And I have to tell you that within the public library community, people were conflicted about this, professional librarians.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a professional librarian tell me that we were wrong to go after an exemption, because it was immoral, the government in South Africa, and this is the way we were going to get them to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yes, indeed, it was censorship, but it was censorship with a purpose.
Oh.
Well, all censorship has a purpose. On my staff in the system, there was a very thoughtful, respectable librarian who said, you know, I know it's censorship, but I abhorred the apartheid system so much, I cannot support you. I support the censorship this involves. So there were librarians who saw this as an exception. It was controversial.
Very.
But we did win the day, and we were able to continue to buy Disney films and Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, that's a great story, and what an opportunity for you to really stand up for something that you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And even in, because I can see that other librarians' point of view, it was a bad system, and
Mm-hmm.
it's right to stand up against when injustice is being done, but at the same time, you're giving up so much, like you said, intellectual freedom.
We were abrogating rights of citizens of the United States to benefit the downtrodden citizens in South Africa, and that wasn't a trade for me. And it wasn't a trade for Susan, and she really took the leadership role in this. She really waved the banner, and
What a great example. You know,
it was stirring.
awesome. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, I think, oh, I would love to be able to stand up for something like that, but how much, courage that must have taken is incredible to think about.
Well,
To stand up to the whole city and say, I'm not okay with this.
well,
Wonderful.
it would have been much less successful if the director of the Austin Public Library didn't agree with us.
Yeah.
And told us, no, you cut it out. You go this far, you're going against city policy, you're going to be fired.
Wow.
I can't tell you what I would have done then. I may back down. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there were people who agreed with us who didn't bring the barriers that they could have to stop this. So
That's wonderful.
even though they didn't step up, the director of the Austin Public Library, David Earl Holt,
Mhm.
he could have stopped this and nipped this in the bud. So but he agreed with us.
That's
But he
great.
couldn't say he agreed with us.
Yeah.
The reality of the political environment in an organization.
Mm.
He could have been fired if he had raised the banner.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So one of the ways that he tacitly supported was by letting, was it Susan?
Mhm.
By letting her take the lead and you be support for her,
Mhm.
so that he wasn't stopping anything, but he wasn't necessarily putting his rubber stamp on it either.
That's right.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. And what a great way to start out, from learning from Sam, learning, that libraries
Mhm.
are political, and then having to really implement that in your own career.
Mhm.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. Thank you. What a great example for current library students too, to really internalize and try to learn from and be willing to accept that and stand up for what we believe in and what we really think is right. That's
Yeah,
great.
but it is like that scene from Harry Potter,
Mhm.
the movie, where all these kids want to learn how to do magic and fight evil. And what he says is, it doesn't feel fun. You don't feel elation. It's scary. It's really scary. And you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So it looks more attractive and inspiring from the outside than it feels when you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's much more scary, and you don't know what the outcome could be. And it could be your job.
So
And-
how did it feel? What was it like?
Well, again, not as scary as it would have been had I really had my job on the line.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that I did. And it wasn't on the line for Susan either. So we knew that there could be long-term bad consequences down the road with a promotion or something like that. But it didn't mean our livelihood. And, you know, when it means your livelihood, and you've got kids and a house payment and a car payment, that's my courage was not tested as the courage of other librarians has been tested when they really get their job is on the line.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that story. I really appreciate
Sure.
it. So let's go back a little bit. So you went to school at the University of Texas,
Sure.
and you got your
MLS, Masters of Library Science. No fancy
Wonderful.
information business, no iSchool.
It was
stuff.
no iSchool back then.
It was library science. And I graduated the first semester of summer. I completed my work and received the degree in August. And then I was extremely fortunate to be hired by the Austin Public Library
Oh, wonderful.
as a branch manager.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Straight out of school?
Straight out of school.
Well, congratulations.
No supervisory experience not needed, yes, needed, but required. And I was made the branch manager of the Twin Oaks Branch Library.
Twin Oaks. Wonderful.
Very small branch, 1,100 square feet, 17,000 titles, right next to the Mini-Max in the Twin Oaks Shopping Center. We looked out onto the parking lot that looked out onto Old Torf. The library, Twin Oaks, has moved twice since then. I moved that library back into the second tier of shops that was built in the middle 70s.
Oh, wow.
We had a new home, and it was 1,700 square feet. Ooh, so big. But it was it was the first storefront branch established by Austin Public in 1955.
Oh, tell me more about a storefront branch. Tell me what that means.
Well, imagine let's see, what kind of storefront? Well, in a strip center.
Oh,
you have,
okay.
you
As
have
opposed to a
Baskin-Robbins.
freestanding library?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
thank you. Okay.
And the Austin model at that time was to go into a neighborhood with a storefront, because you could lease space pretty cheaply. You could put in a library building, or a library into the storefront. The first Twin Oaks was 400 square feet, a little up the hill in that strip center, and then it was slightly larger, and then it moved to where it was when I became the librarian in, probably mid-60s, like 65. And I was the branch librarian there. I supervised 5 people. They were all part-time, and we were open 6 days a week, 10 to 6, 4 days at 10 to 8, one day, which was Thursday, and then Saturday 9 to 5. And we had a good circulation. Usually it was about, oh gosh, I can't remember. I don't remember. But it was for such a small branch, it was a respectable
Oh, wonderful.
operation.
So what changes did you see from the time that you started there to moving to another location, and then when you left? What did you see evolve about the library?
Oh my word, a lot. And here's my first show and tell.
Oh, yay.
Austin Public was considered kind of cutting edge technologically because they had a book catalog based on computer records.
Oh, wow.
Now, they developed like a freestanding punch card system with the author, title, subject, and they created a book catalog. And this, have you ever seen one?
No, I haven't. I'm interested to
This
see
is a book catalog.
Oh, lift it up. There we go.
And this is 1976.
Wow.
And I don't know when they started publishing these, but they went from the card catalog to the book catalog.
Oh.
It had to be maybe late 60s, early 70s. And there would be a punch card for each one of these, the titles. And it was like this. And this is the subject. So you'd look up the subject,
Wow.
you'd look at the books, you'd get a call number. And as I recall, there were no locations. No locations. And there were, at that time, 15 branches. So you had to take the catalog to the shelf or write it down, the number, depending upon the size, to see if the book was on the shelf. But you didn't know if you owned it. But you did know that it was owned by the system,
Somewhere
and you
in the
could fill
system.
out a reserve card and get it.
That's
And it would
great.
at least give you a place to start browsing. So this is
That's
where I
great.
learned the Dewey Decimal System. Really, really learned it. When you're going to the shelf looking for cookbooks, how many times do you have to look up the number to know where to go? Well, after 2 or 3 times, you know where to go.
You start to remember.
You start to remember. Now this is a 76, and this is volume. There are 3 volumes for this year. And this was pretty cutting edge at that time. No really computerized systems, because we didn't have, the technology. The software was definitely evolving. And the catalog would be published in a book form once a year, and then there would be supplements sent out. So you got to look in this, then you got to look in the supplements. Yeah.
So what was it that made this so different from using the card catalog?
Well, card catalogs were based at one location. So you would have the holdings of your branch in a card catalog at your location. You would have no idea what was anywhere else. This was a leap forward.
Because you were able to find what was available anywhere in the system.
Yes.
So if that book was at the branch down the road, you'd be able to request it, and this was a way to find
Yes.
it, to not have to go to every other branch.
Right, and what we would do,
Awesome.
if depending upon how many people were needing help, we would find a title in here, and we'd get on the phone and we'd call the neighboring branches, and if it was on the shelf, they would hold it, and the patron would go get it. Or sometime the patron would say, "Please send it to me," and we would send it. But it was a crapshoot. You didn't know if the South Side, or what was it, South Mall, oh gosh, what was the name of that other branch that was on Ben White, can't remember the name, if they had it or not. So you would just call around to locations the patron would be willing to drive to. And if that came up, you could only do so many phone calls. You would fill out a reserve card, collect 25 cents, and put it on reserve to get the book for the patron. But it would at least tell you if you owned it. So here we have subject,
How cool.
we have title,
Oh, wonderful.
and we have author.
Wow. And were those the 3 ways you could search for things in the catalog? Subject, author, and
The
title?
Yeah,
Wow.
your basic 3 entries in your shelf list, which you probably don't know what a shelf list is. Do you?
Tell me more.
Okay. The Austin Public Library would, for years and years, maintained a shelf list based on cards, even when they were computerized, mechanized. This is mechanization because it's data processing cards to compile this. The computer catalogs that they subsequently bought and moved into were actually databases, and the rudimentary database searching was possible. But the shelf list, the cataloging department would, for years, did original cataloging on everything. Or titles might come in, and they might request the cards from the Library of Congress with the card catalog number on it, because when publication in source started, which was on my watch sometime in the mid-70s, the cataloging information was inside the book, and there's your clue, there's the catalog number, and you would buy it and ship it. Or you would sit down in the room full of catalogers, and they would catalog, and they would create a shelf list, which is the main record of possession of that book. and they filed it away in this huge bank of their card catalog. They would file the main entry by main entry. And that was the original record of ownership of the material. And these are the mechanics that just don't exist anymore. This is very old school. So that was the basic shelf list. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Okay, well,
So-
that's the way it was in the old days.
That's wonderful. So from card catalog for just that one branch to the collection catalog of everything that the Austin Public Library owned, what happened next?
They went to, this was pre-Mark record. You must understand, this was pre-Mark. And sometime in the middle 70s, I can't even remember, Austin adopted the Mark standard.
Okay.
And that was done through the leadership of a woman named Dr. Ann Bowden.
Ann Bowden.
Ann Bowden. She was working on a PhD and became a lecturer and a professor in the library school. But she was very much old school, but wanting to adopt the best, newest technology to make library access a reality. She was very much on the technical side of libraries. And she was an early adopter of Mark records. So all these old catalogs, records that we had in punch cards, eventually were converted to Mark standard catalog records, which again I believe they bought, and I'm not sure the mechanism of that. The best person to talk about the mechanism of all of that is a woman named Sharon Justice.
Sharon Justice.
And she was a cataloger at Austin Public. Through this period, she started in the mid-70s, and she could really correct all the information I've given you.
Wow.
But she knows the technical side, the technical evolution of Austin Public. But from the book catalog, we went to something called a ROM catalog, read-only memory. And it was a strip tape of microfilm that was in a cabinet, and you could advance it forward and back. And it was basically the book catalog by author, title, subject, searchable that way. And it was more quickly updatable and producible. You weren't publishing, you weren't printing. But again, that became very cumbersome. So we moved from the book to the Comcat. And that was done probably 76, 77, somewhere around there. I can't really remember.
That's okay.
And then the next step after that was the acquisition of the Dynex automation system. That was the first automated system that Austin bought, and this is with terminals and searchable and you know, the integrated records, and so that was the very first. And it was one of those full-blown big old systems with a big RFP and all the
RFP?
Request for Proposal.
Thank you.
RFP. It's a big deal in library automation acquisitions.
So tell me about, what were you thinking when these new technologies were coming in? What was that like, being a librarian who had gotten used to using one system and then got used to another? What did you think when this Dynex automation system came in?
Well, I actually left the employ of the Austin Public Library.
Oh.
And I went to Europe.
Well, there we
So
go.
that all happened there was a 5-year period where I worked for the state and for other reasons before I could get back on. But that all happened when I was not there.
Oh, wow.
So I did not live through the agony of Dynex, of the implementation.
Got it.
And when I went back to work in '82, I wasn't working with the public and the catalog on a day-to-day basis like I was before. But I was a consumer, and I found as a consumer of the catalog hard to search, but still easier than the ROM, easier than the book. So these were improvements as we went along. Those were improvements.
Yeah.
But by 80, when I started with the system in '82, that was we were working directly with public librarians in small public libraries and large public libraries in a 30-county region. They weren't here. They were still in card catalogs.
Oh.
They were still in the old technology, and it would take a long time to get to automated catalogs. And in fact, we have 2 system members today that are not automated. They do not have electronic records. They need to go through the whole conversion process. And, so Austin left that behind quite some time ago, but new libraries being born don't have that automatically. They usually go through a step with cards or some sort of rudimentary catalog before they have an automated library management system or automated catalog.
Even still, or do you find that now, like this year, if a new library was to open up, would they still start out with a card catalog, or would they start out with some sort of more technology-based system?
Depends upon how much money they have.
Really?
Yeah, it's all about money. When you start a public library in Texas, you are doing it on your own dime. There's no public support, and it is truly a group of people who come together to establish a library for altruistic reasons. Their community needs a library. There's nothing else for the kids to do. There's nothing here for people. We need a library. People come together. They donate time, money, space, enthusiasm. They get their friends to come in and do things for free. It is truly an altruistic act, group act of citizens, concerned citizens coming together to do this.
And then just eventually everyone works hard enough and it gets important enough that then they can start asking for funds from their city or...
Well, yes. They have to ask for funds from city or county or school district. They eventually get to the point where they can apply for system membership in the state library system. And the criteria for membership are set up in rules, and they're pretty cut and dry. You need this much money, you need this many hours, you need this kind of personnel, you need things. So when they reach that threshold, then they can apply for system membership, and if they qualify, they become a system member. Then they qualify for state aid, real cash money.
But they have to meet those requirements.
Yes.
For membership before they can get any real state money.
Right. And we're not talking about a lot of state money.
No.
We're talking about $2,000. But that's what it takes to get to system membership. And when I started in 1982, we had 34, maybe 35, the number is real fuzzy, system member libraries in 30 counties.
And this was with Central Texas Library System?
That's right.
Okay.
As I was hired in January of 1982 to be the children's and outreach consultant. And at that time there were 30, mid-30s member libraries. And a member library is an administrative unit. So Austin was one member, not 15 members. So we had 35, let's say, freestanding public libraries in 30 counties. We now have 79.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that still means Austin Public Library counts as one. Amazing.
So that's what's happened in the 28 years, whatever the math is, that I've been associated with the system.
Wonderful.
There's been more than a doubling of public libraries. So many communities have made that decision. Many altruistic community groups have decided we need a public library. And you don't have to go far to find those libraries. West Bank in Westlake Hills, Elroy, which is on FM 812 on the east side of Austin, on the bottom end of the airport, Pflugerville, Hutto, Round Rock, who else is out there? Cedar Park, Liberty Hill, Leander. Let's go south and we'll see Buda, Kyle, Wimberley, Dripping Springs, San Marcos was an original member of the system. They were there. Okay, those are just north a little and south a little, but that's the growth we've seen in public libraries.
Wow. And those are all libraries that you've seen start out as just somebody in the community saying, hey, I think we need a library.
Yep.
Everybody getting together, making it happen, and now they're full-fledged member libraries
They're
of
going and
CTLS.
When I visited Cedar Park in 1982, I think the library had gotten membership in 81. It was in a converted laundromat, concrete block, cinder block laundromat. It was as big as a laundromat and not very big. It had the worst air conditioner. It sounded like a freight train, and it blew out cold air, and it condensed water, and it was nasty. And the librarian was Pauline Lamb, and she is still the director.
Oh, wow.
So Cedar Park used to be where the cedar choppers lived. Do you know what a cedar chopper is?
I do not.
It is, think of poor white trash, hill country style. These are the poor white people, or working class people, who chop cedar posts to put on the side of the road so you can put fences around. They did manual labor, you know. These were cedar choppers. They used to have a cedar chopper fest in Cedar Park, celebrating the kind of working hill country ranch kind of rural roots. Well, they don't do that anymore. That's not what Cedar Park is all about now. It's a high-toned suburb of Austin. Those days are long behind. Nobody remembers that. Those old properties where those cedar choppers lived, big acreage plots of dust and rocks and cedar, are gone. They're subdivisions and they're very expensive. So that's what Cedar Park was like when I went out there.
So it was those cedar choppers, as they were called, who started the movement to start the public library?
It was their better cultured wives. It's really what it is. In my experience, it's women of the community, usually better educated, or just they love to read. They don't have to be better educated, but they have a love of reading and education, a real respect for it. And they were the impetus to start a library. And I've seen this in all these libraries that have started. It's mainly women that are doing this.
Wow.
And there are men involved. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are energetic male volunteers, but it is heavily women, and it's women in the community that have standing, whether they're newcomers to the community or they're the old grand dames or the daughters of the grand dames. They have standing, and they're doing this for their community. They're doing it for Moody or Mart or whatever community they're in to make it better.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's that they maybe grew up somewhere else that had libraries, and so they were used to them being there and they wanted to see one? Or is there some other reason that these women are the reason it starts?
That's a big factor in it, but it isn't like 75% of the people who started a library fit that profile. They maybe they lived in Dallas and had good libraries and they wanted to bring it back to there. These are also indigenous folks who maybe they went off to college or maybe they didn't. Maybe they spent their whole life in Jonestown, but they wanted something better for their children. And there wasn't any outlet that wasn't connected with the schools or wasn't alcohol related, you know, and they wanted something better for the community. And this is an established pattern in public library development, and it certainly goes back to the women's clubs, the Texas Federation of Women's Clubs that had the old time libraries like Llano were established by the Literary Guild or the Ladies Fortnightly Club. The Fortnightly Club in Brenham, Texas is over 100 years old, and they established a public library. And that could have been a bookshelf in the county courthouse or in the basement, but they were the impetus to start a library, and this is like 18 something, like 90 or 1901. So, and many of these women's clubs, they were literary societies. They read books and talked about them. They cared about the education in their community, and they wanted a library. And these had to be the better educated, more affluent members of that community. Llano is another great example of being established by a women's club and growing from that, and eventually the county took over the function of the public library in Llano County.
Wow.
And in Brenham, the city took over the function, the operation and support of the public library. So I want to say the old style libraries, or the older, more established libraries, fit this model. The Austin Public Library came from the University Women's Club, or Association of University Women, 1920 something. Austin sort of got started later than places like Llano or Brenham, which is kind of interesting,
Yeah.
given the heavy educational influence of Austin, or of the university in Austin's life. But so that it kind of is, it's the heritage of the public library movement in Texas as I know it, and I do not have a broad view of it. It's confined to 25,000 square miles, 30 counties, Central Texas communities.
Wow, that's great though, and it's interesting that you have seen these libraries over time grow.
Oh,
This same
yes.
pattern is always happening even today.
Yes,
That's really
even
cool.
today. Even
Yeah.
today.
Wow. So tell me a little bit more about your work history with Central Texas Library System. Tell me about what you did. You started out as a children's coordinator.
Children's consultant and outreach consultant, specialist or something. I forget what my title was. It was a long time ago. My main function was to consult with public libraries on services to children, and also run the film collection, the 16mm film collection. And I learned to do consulting. And it was more than children's, it was general library operation. Because you don't go into a library that's 1,000 square feet and look only at the children's materials. You look at everything. I was one of 2 consultants at the time in 1982. One was in adult services, the other was my position.
So you did half and she did half, basically.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And and that, I guess I did that for about 7 years, and in '89 I was appointed the coordinator of the Central Texas, which is the boss.
Okay.
And by that time, computers had arrived. We had an automation consultant, which we added, the media children's person, which evolved, and the adult services. So there were 4 consultants, including myself, because I, of course, still did consulting. And we're completely supported with state and federal money, and have always been, and we're always associated with the Austin Public Library. When the Systems Act was passed in '69 and then enabled with money, the Austin Public Library became a major resource center, and the law set up the what a system office did, what their responsibilities were. The state library wrote rules about the grants, and what we do every year is set out well in advance, 6 months in advance, with performance measures and all that horrible bureaucratic stuff. And our job was library development, which means helping libraries that are existing libraries to improve their library operations and their services to the public, and then help new libraries become established. And we've done that since the beginning of CTLS. And I was coordinator in '89, and after a lot of history, in 2004, the membership of CTLS, comprised of, at that time, 75 or 72 libraries, voted to leave the Austin Public Library, to form a nonprofit corporation and to have the governance of the system by a board of directors elected by the lay representatives. So we left the Austin Public Library September 1, 2005, and we've been operating as a nonprofit since that time.
Interesting. So when you were associated with the Austin Public Library, was it like you were housed in the Austin Public Library offices and you operated as an arm of Austin Public Library?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We were city employees. We followed all city rules and regulations just like they do out at the front desk. The actual head of the system was the director of the Austin Public Library. They were the director of the system, and I was the coordinator. I actually ran it. It was a division of the Austin Public Library, and we were part and parcel to everything, involved with everything and on all the committees. The difference was our funding source. We were completely funded with grants from the state library. So every expense involved in our operation was paid for by the state or federal government. Not a penny came from City of Austin taxpayers. So our operation in that way was insulated from the ups and downs of the Austin budget.
Interesting.
And it continues today. It's still the same.
Yeah.
We have that same money source, same contracts, and we answer directly to the state library, not through the city council.
So it's really more just on paper, you're no longer associated with the Austin Public Library, but lots of things function just as they did before?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And Austin always was a member.
Ah.
But you might think of it as first among equals. Because when your boss is the director of the Austin Public Library, what Austin wants is what counts.
That's what happens.
And
Got it.
when you're a nonprofit and you have 9 board of directors elected from all over the region, Bryan, Fairfield, Hillsborough, we have an Austin representative, West Bank, Hays County. I mean, you know, you're answering to a different set of individuals that are not librarians, they're library supporters, that are looking out for lots of people and not for just the interest of the public library.
Okay.
But I do want to make it really clear that the directors that I have worked for, David Earl Holt and Brenda Branch, never took advantage of the opportunity to plunder the grant as other library MRC directors had done for their system grants.
Really?
No, they
That's good to know.
both were very, very scrupulous about being even-handed and fair. And you really can't say that. In my observation, you can't say that about all the systems around the state. And for that, the Central Texas Library System owes Austin an enormous debt of gratitude, just for the way they administered the grant and the way they operated with such integrity.
Wow, that's wonderful to hear. So, well, we're running low on time.
Okay.
Do you have any more show and tell items?
No, that's all.
Oh,
I
no,
have.
that was wonderful. I just wanted to make sure that we got to everything.
Mhm.
So it sounds like you've had a really cool career and had some really important people who were involved in shaping it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Sam Whitten, with him giving you that really strong stance that intellectual freedom is what matters and that that's what libraries are here to defend. And then working under great directors, it sounds like David Earl Holt, who was willing to support you, and Susan Niefler when you really felt like it was important to take a stand. I love that. And then it sounds like you've had an opportunity to kind of guide everything as the coordinator of Central Texas Library Systems. What a wonderful position.
It is. I've been extremely fortunate in my career.
Yeah.
I have, and been very blessed, and I don't know that I deserve it, but it is, you know, I'm personally very gratified that I feel like I've had a career that's made some difference, and then I've worked with wonderful people. Librarians are wonderful to work with, every one of them.
It sounds like it. All the people you've spoken about, I wish I could work with them. I mean, they all sound so wonderful.
Well, Susan Niefler is still around. She still works for me.
Oh, awesome.
She is our youth specialist in the nonprofit library system,
Oh, wow.
blowing and going and doing a wonderful job. and is a star in the state.
Wow.
And I'm so proud to still be able to call myself her boss.
That's great. Well, so in closing, what do you feel like is the most important thing a librarian needs to keep in mind at all times? Like, what would be your prime directive for a librarian?
Ooh. uh, you know, it's so easy to be distracted by the crazy bureaucracy you find yourself in. And librarians cannot avoid bureaucracy. We are part of it. We are integral to it. And to keep reminding yourself you're doing this for people you care about, the public in a generic way, but also people in the small way, like the kids that live down the block, the senior citizens that you may know. It's really hard to, with all the bureaucratic crap that comes down, the reason you're there is to serve people, and you're doing the Lord's work with helping them connect with information, reading, viewing, whatever it is that enriches their lives in a positive way. And that's what you have to keep reminding yourself, that there's a reason why you're putting up with this madness, that the end result of your efforts are worthwhile and people are going to benefit. And they may never know your name, but you may be planting a memory in a child about how they were helped finding something that expanded their life and their vision. You hear this from successful people. They say, I remember when I went into the Brooklyn Public Library or the Honolulu Public Library and got what I needed, and you know that it was an impact. It had an impact on my life, a positive one. They will not remember your name or your face. They'll remember what you did for them. And keeping that in mind, that that's the real reason you're there, is the hardest thing to do, but the most important, or you will go crazy having to put up with craziness.
So it's about taking care of people, and that's really what our job is about as librarians, is serving the people in our community who need us.
Yes.
Wonderful. I think that's a great thing for us to keep in mind. All right. Well, Pat, thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate this.